Okay, so I'm going to show you how to make this really beautiful orchid out of sugar paste or gum paste, and this is all hand painted to give you this really pretty and unusual flower. So I have this cutter set. I'll put a link below of where I bought this, and this has all the cutters that you'll need to make the orchid. And I've taken some really pale pink gum paste, and I'm going to roll this out on a veining board. So just using the veins that are in the middle of the board and using a cell tool, I'm just going to roll this out. Feel free to put a little bit of cornstarch down or petal paste if it is sticking to the board. So just going to roll this out, and basically we just want that nice indentation at the back, and that's where we'll insert our wire. So I'm going to take the center piece first, and I'll show you how to make the center of our orchid. So as you can see, it's a little bit small, so I'm just going to roll out the side here just to make sure that everything fits in, and then we'll press that down and cut into that. So there's a few ways you can do this, but I'm going to show you how I prefer to do it. What I like to do is actually cut the top part of the center off, and you'll see why a little bit later. So I'm going to take a 24 gauge wire. I'm using a white wire here, but of course you can use green. It's really down to personal preference. I'm going to dip the end in a little bit of edible glue, and then we're just going to thread this about a quarter of the way through the back of the top of our centerpiece for the orchid, and then just press that in there. So you're just sliding it through where we've made that little vein. And then I'm going to take my cell tool and just kind of make a little indentation at the front, turning that over. So that's kind of your inside bit that points downwards. And then just making sure that's attached really nicely to the wire. I'm going to pinch the end so we get our little pointed shape that we want for this particular orchid. And then again, we just take our wire and we're going to thread this through about half of the way through the back of our other piece that's for the center, and just press that down. Now taking a ball tool, we are going, now taking our knife or scalpel, we can just cut down the middle there, and then this gives us the two little kind of cold feet that you see on an orchid. And now taking our ball tool, we will go around and we will just soften those edges. So just halfway on the mat and halfway on the paste, we just go around and curl those edges so they're nice and soft. Now taking the smaller part of the ball tool, we can just roll those edges. As you see, as you press down and use that pressure upwards, it curls the ends, but we want to curl that a little bit more, so we will take a toothpick and you can kind of just gently roll that over the toothpick so that we get a really nice curl to the end. And I think the thing is not to be too exact with both sides. Let it be a bit natural, let them kind of look a bit odd, because this actually makes it look a lot more realistic than if you make them really symmetrical. And we can kind of just curl that up there. You do want a really good quality gum paste or sugar paste, or sugar flower paste I should say, that sets up quite hard quite quickly. It will work better. So again, I'm rolling in these little wing parts of the orchid just by taking the ball tool and then pulling it in towards itself to give us these little wings. And there we go. So you can kind of press these in and curl them as well, just to add a little bit more interest. I'm working with an image of an orchid that I like, so I'm kind of looking at that and then manipulating the sides so that it looks really similar to this orchid. And what will happen here is once these are dry, the top part will sit above, we'll attach it here, and it will kind of sit inwards on the other part of our centerpiece. So I've just got an egg carton here, and I'm going to kind of bend this in. You want those little feet to be a little bit curled inwards and it to sit like this inside the box, so it will dry like this, and that's the shape we're going for. And then the other little piece we can kind of just leave in there to dry, and just leave those overnight. So we're going to take the wing part, as I call it. These are kind of like the arms of your orchid. We want 2 of those, and we're going to do the same again, just cutting out 2 of these wings and inserting our wire into them. I'm just using a bigger rolling pin here now, just because it's a bigger shape. It really is just down to personal preference. I wouldn't worry too much, whatever you prefer. And just taking that, again, we just go in with our 24 gauge wire with a little bit of edible glue, and we just thread that through about 1/4 of the way to halfway at the back, and kind of just pinch that down at the bottom to make sure that it is really nicely secured to the wire. And then flipping that over onto a soft mat, we're going to just gently soften that edge, just to make it look a lot more realistic and really nice and delicate. So I have these really cool impression mats from Squire's Kitchen. These are orchid impression mats. You have the centerpiece, and then you have the, well, not the center, you have the back and the front, sorry. And you want to lay the back of your orchid into the vena that's dipped. So the one on your right basically is the one that the back of our orchid will lay into, and then the front of the orchid is the part that presses inwards. So this piece on the left, we just press down onto our orchid, and it makes this really incredible impression and just makes it look so realistic. So I really love these. And these we're going to set aside into an apple crate, or the cardboard apple holders. I'm not really sure what you call them. So again, we're going to go down and use our veining board to do what I call the feet of the orchid. There are actual names for these parts of the flowers, but for the sake of this video and to make it a lot more simpler, we just call them the feet, the wings or arms, and the head. So we're doing the feet. Now what you see with this cutter, you want to flip it over so you've got the opposite side, and you basically want the long flat side to be facing each other. I'm going to thread this again, and as you'll see, what I did here is because I needed to do 2 and I had a lot of paste, it was a lot quicker to just roll it out across the board so that I covered both the indentations where the veining board is, so I can do 2 at the same time. And again, just insert the wire like before, and you just want to make sure you have the right side facing each other. So we're just going to soften those edges once again and put those in our impression mat, just making sure we have them the right way around. And these ones we do on the opposite side because they actually kind of bend outwards towards the flower rather than inward. I mean, when you get hold of these tools, it will make more sense. It's the kind of thing you need to play around with and see it for yourself to understand how it works. And now we're going to do the head of the orchid. So we're just going to roll one of these out over on our veining board. And then the flat part is the bottom of the petal. And we'll just take our wire, add in the glue, and then thread this through about 1/3 or halfway through the petal. And there we go, that's all secured. And again, we just soften those edges, and then we get the head part of our impression molds, and we just press those in there and make a lovely impression into the petal. So it's really straightforward. The bit that takes a bit longer is the painting. So this is my apple crate holder. There's probably a more accurate name for that, but this is what I'm going to use just to kind of set these petals up overnight so that they have a nice shape to them and they're ready to use the following day. So what I've done here is I have attached the center part of my orchid together, adding that little head to the body. I will show you later on in the video how I did that, but let's go ahead and start painting. This is the image that I'm using to influence the final design of this orchid. These orchids are stunning. I don't know what they're called, but they're beautiful, and that is what I want my sugar flower to look like. So I'm going in with this rainbow dust. I have a rose colour, which is a really nice pale pink, and then I have a warmer pink from Squire's Kitchen, and a lovely sunflower yellow, which is really lovely and bright. So we're going to use some vodka. You want really high proof alcohol because this will evaporate very quickly, and a range of paintbrushes. So I'm just going to put a little bit of this rose coloured petal dust into a palette and squeeze some vodka in there, and we're going to just basically make up a really watery paint that will evaporate nicely. We want this to be quite translucent, so don't make it too thick. And then I'm just going to start applying this to the very sides of this orchid. So I'm basically just using that photo that I showed you for reference, and I'm kind of just keep referring back to that and painting my flower so that it looks quite similar. So again, I'm just going in really light at first, try not to make it too heavy, the paint, because we want this to look really subtle and realistic. This is like my favourite part really of flower making. I love getting the paintbrush out and being able to paint onto a flower and add all that colour. And we're going to just add more into the centre because, again, referring back to that photo, it has a deeper colour in the throat of the orchid. There we go, I've used one of the terms that I should be using for these flowers. And I'm just going to kind of paint those little edges as well, and those little feet, just adding colour. And again, not being too precise, just getting really creative with this and trying to make it look as natural as possible. I feel like that just really does work best. And you can kind of build up the colour a little bit more at the front, just so you've got a couple of different tones. I'm going in with the pink, and I've used a little less vodka to make it a deeper colour, and I'm just going to add this to the edges of this orchid. As you can see, it's a lot less translucent now. We're kind of being a little more heavy on the colour here. And then this is my favourite part, is when we start to flick little dots of paint onto the top of the orchid. So if you look at an orchid really closely, there's always these tiny speckles of colour, and all we do is we just load up that paintbrush with a less diluted version of paint, and then we just brush it with our finger to kind of flick the colour on. So now going in with our sunflower yellow, I'm going to just add little touches of that to the inside of the throat and then to the edges where the little wings are on here, just to really build up that colour, add some interest and make this look as realistic as possible. And it will really make the orchid pop now when you get to here. So just loading the brush up with that yellow and adding it to the very edges of the centre of the orchid. I've also gone in and added some white, so I will show you that too. We're just going kind of dabbing this along a little bit on the back of the orchid, a little bit on the inside, just to make this look really natural and realistic, and we'll add some to the very top of the orchid centre too. So I love this product. This is a white paint from Colour Mill, and I'm just going to use this on the edge of the orchid centre. This is actually what you use to dye chocolate, so it does take a little bit longer to dry out. You can also just use a white petal dust and mix this with vodka too. So now I have all my petals that have dried overnight, and we're going to start individually painting each one of these. So I'm taking a very small pointed paintbrush, and I'm going to go in with my diluted rose colour paint and just start drawing or painting some lines through the centre and around the side, and then we're going to add a few kind of wiggly lines. This is all just looking back at that photo that I have of the orchids and trying to copy that image. So this is kind of like the veins on a leaf, or when you think about our own anatomy and how our how our veins are, you get all these tiny little interconnected webs. So that's really what I'm trying to do here. So there's a few little gaps. It's not exact. Be very creative with this and just play around. And I quite like how it's very translucent, this paint, because I'm trying to go for that very realistic and delicate effect. So just make sure you really water down that petal dust. So I'm going in, some lines are a little bit thicker than others, and just going in at the side here and just really dragging that paint around. So as you'll see, the centre is a little bit more structured, and then as we come out towards the edges, you get a lot more lines and veins. This is a bit where you just have to kind of use your creative intuition and really go for it. But I'm just painting those lines, going in and out, taking them out to the edge from the centre, and then doing little kind of lines and veins in between to get the finished effect. And we're going to do this to all of the petals. So again, I'll show the head part of the orchid as an example. We're just drawing those lines up and down, following the direction of those little impressions that we've made as well. So kind of use that as guidance, that really helps. We're just highlighting those. Always referring back to the image that I have. And just kind of drawing all those little squiggly lines in there. And there we go. So you're going to do that to all of them and leave them to dry overnight. And then I'm taking some florist tape here, and what I like to do is fold mine in half a few times and then cut it in the middle just to make it thinner. And then we'll just unravel that and then pull it to activate it so that it's nice and sticky. So this is the centre part. I'll show you how I did secure this. So just taking the very top, we're going to kind of slot this above and inside the bottom part of our orchid centre. So just bending that very gently back. Be very careful when you bend your sugar paste or sugar forest paste back on the wire. Attaching the top just like that, and then we just take our tape and just wrap that round using the warmth of your fingers and pulling it down as we go, tightening that over onto the wire. Just like so. Now let's get to assembling. So we have our wings or the arms. These are going on the very outside of the centre of our orchid. So again, just like we did, we're going to take our tape and we're going to use the sticky part against the wire, closing that in on itself and then just wrapping it round. If you want a more detailed video about how to secure wired flowers, please feel free to look back at some of my older videos where I assemble a sugar florist wreath or a peony, and you'll be able to see a real good close-up of how to do that. But if you're quite versed in sugar flower making, then this will be quite straightforward to you. So again, we're just attaching the two sides, spinning that round, and then our top of our orchid we will place at the top of the centerpiece. So just moving that to the back, and of course you can move those petals around just to make it a little bit easier to secure everything. And that goes at the back of the wings. Again, we're just bringing that tape round, pulling it, twisting it against the wire, making it nice and tight and secure, and then you can snap off any excess tape if you have some. And then our two little feet, remember that you want the straighter part to be facing the inside of the stem. So this will be pointing downwards and on the inside of the stem, just as so. So again, I'll just place this at the back and secure this with tape. Sometimes it's really nice to work with a foam mat underneath you while you're doing this, just in case you do drop your flower down onto a hard surface. It's a lot safer to use a foam mat, so I definitely recommend doing that. And then again we're going to add the other orchid, just making sure that nice flat side is facing the stem and the rounded side is facing away from the stem. And then just securing that with tape. Again, you can use green forest tape if you've used green forest wire. I just went for white for this particular flower. And then you can just move those petals and move the centre downward to make it look really realistic. And there we go, a very beautiful and unique orchid. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you're first in the know when my next video comes along.